Hi, folks. Democrats are having another week where reality is optional and delusion is apparently mandatory, like a political Burning Man of sorts, but with more taxpayer money and somehow less showers. And there's no greater example of that than The View's Sunny Hostin explaining that narco-terrorists aren't criminals. They're basically misunderstood exchange students you're supposed to tuck in at night and send home with a snack bag. But before we get to that, today we're starting out with this United Methodist Church pastor announcing mid-sermon that he's transitioning, not becoming a woman, but giving up pretending to be a man, which honestly could be the unofficial DNC slogan at this point.
I did not get into ministry to talk about myself or my personal life, but sometimes there are things that happen in a pastor's personal life that is going to find its way out into ministry. And so I am inviting you to join me in a season of creative transformation for myself, and I think for all of us. So I get to announce with joy that I'm transitioning.
What?
I'm affirming and saying to all of you that I am transgender.
That's gay.
And so the best way to put this is that I'm not becoming a woman. I'm giving up pretending to be a man.
What? No.
And it will change.
No!
Thank God you have never chosen me as your pastor based off of my appearance. Amen. I was waiting for that. None of you ever judged me, or that was not part of the intake process of me being your pastor, was because of how my face looked, or my body, or how long my hair is, or my clothes. Because at the end of the day, we know that clothes are just fibers. They do not carry an anatomy with them. So to say that something's girls' clothes or boys' clothes, well, they don't come with a reproductive system.
What are you talking about?
Amen? So what will change my voice? It might go a tad higher. Pronouns, she, her. But I'm not going to be pronoun police.
Huh?
Okay? Because I don't think that anybody will misgender or mispronoun out of malice. This is a process. It's a transition. What will change is my full name. I'm taking on for me Fiona's middle name so that we have that in common.
All right, dude.
What may change is that we might become known within the community as an even safer space for people who have felt marginalized.
What?
Are my parents okay with this? Absolutely not.
Thank God.
They texted me this morning and they asked for me to tell you all that they do not support me.
All right.
And that they have chosen their convictions and their beliefs over supporting their child. I'm
Good for them.
in the category of what they call asexual. I've been that way since we've all been together.
In the words of Jesus Christ, that is the synagogue of Satan, or in this case, the church of Satan. And the fact that this even needs to be said tells you how far we've drifted as a culture. Needless to say, I don't see any reason why a clergy member's sexuality or self-identity should ever be the centerpiece of a sermon, much less a church. So, way to make an argument for lifetime celibacy, dude. I guess the Catholic Church got it right all along. Now, if you're using your sexual identity as a way to lead, how do I say this? Keep your bedroom out of my church, dude. Seriously. Why are you bringing up your sexual habits into your job? Why are you wearing a pride shawl with a Holy Spirit on it? And why are you pretending the rainbow isn't the covenant God made with Noah? It was a symbol of divine hope long before these LGBT activists hijacked it and inverted its meaning. That inversion, turning a sign of God's promise into a flag of sexual identity, isn't just aesthetic, it's spiritual. And it's demonic in the most literal sense. And this is where the deeper issue comes in, folks. The church is the final frontier for this leftist, neo-Marxist political project. Once you dissolve the church of its principles, culture collapses effortlessly because culture is downstream from the church and politics is downstream from culture. Today, that pipeline has reversed. The ideological feedback loop runs from politics into culture and now back into the church because the ultimate goal is top-down capture of every institution that shapes human identity. And yes, you don't even need Leviticus to understand how unbiblical this whole situation is. Look, as Christians, we believe Christ fulfilled the Mosaic law and established a new covenant, but that new covenant didn't erase sin, okay? It reframed how we confront it. In one of the most infamous New Testament passages that wokies love to weaponize against Christians, Christ said, "Whoever is without sin, cast the first stone." But he also said immediately afterwards to the woman who was saved, "Go and sin no more." And further, St. Paul, whose writings modern progressive churches conveniently toss aside, laid out the architecture of the church under Christ's guidance, grounding it in natural law and moral discipline, not in personal impulses like homosexuality. And life with God is a life of discipline. To whom much is given, much is required. As the saying goes, God's love is a love that corrects, not a love that rubber stamps whatever you feel in the moment. And a church that turns itself over to the sexual proclivity of perverts, and yes, that's what this is, will inevitably collapse. You can see it now. The catastrophic decline of mainline Protestant denominations like the UMC and the rapid rise of traditional churches like Catholic, Orthodox, Armenian, because people don't want leftist ideology at the altar. They want communion with God. This isn't brave, folks. It's inversion. It's sickness. And honestly, good on his parents for standing on principle and refusing to enable this kind of behavior. They will get raked over the coals for it, but they chose conviction over emotional bribery. And look, if you want to live as a woman, that's your choice. In the world, Jesus gives you the freedom to walk with him or without him, but don't do it at the altar. Don't stand in the place reserved for shepherds and preach confusion, because that's not religious leadership. That's demonic inversion of the role God entrusted to you. And speaking of demons, the man who is nearly solely responsible for the majority of the societal and cultural ills that we're currently experiencing, Barack Hussein Obama, recently praised the mainstream media in the most insane way possible.
Is there one outlet out there that you would consider the least bias, sort of the most straight news?
Here's the thing. I actually think that the mainstream news still does a very good job of just presenting facts. I think cable, regardless of the cable station, has fallen prey to the same economic imperatives that we're seeing in every other type of news, which is you are deliberately controversial, deliberately aggressive,
stop.
Deliberately trying to make people feel angry and aggrieved because that attracts attention.
Just go away, dude. For the love of God, go retire in Cabo with all your illegal alien friends and Big Mike, because nobody needs to hear you run PR for the very institutions that spent the last decade lighting their own credibility on fire. He says, the mainstream media does a very good job presenting facts. Really? You mean the same mainstream media that, in the case of the BBC just a few weeks ago, was literally caught falsely editing Trump's 2020 speech to make it look like he was inciting an insurrection, and then their CEO refused to acknowledge the deception after they got exposed? Or you mean the same mainstream media that's been losing defamation cases and issuing quiet, embarrassing corrections because they keep running with politically convenient narratives before verifying anything? Of course Obama is out here shilling for them. His entire political legacy relies on legacy media propping up the narrative. Without outlets like CNN, MSDNC, the New York Times, and the Post running interference, Democrats have absolutely nothing. That's why they keep trying to build a podcast ecosystem, and all they produce are deeply unserious, wildly disingenuous voices who can't move public opinion without help. And here comes Barack Hussein Obama adding another delusional take to that pile, pretending the trust crisis doesn't exist. If you actually want Americans to trust institutions again, then stop insulting people's intelligence. Voters, especially moderates, can think for themselves. They have eyes, they have ears. And when they hear a former president telling them to believe the same media that has spent years misreporting, selectively editing, and openly cheerleading for one political side only, they immediately check out. This isn't about partisanship, folks. It's about objective reality. And most Americans are rightfully skeptical of an industry that stopped reporting facts and started just curating narratives that benefit them politically. And speaking of curating narratives, over at MSDNC, they are truly losing their minds. They're just letting Jasmine Crockett go on television, go full balls to the wall, insane, unhinged, untethered to any sort of objective reality. And they're all like happy about it for some reason. I don't even know. This clip is just insane.
Because if that's the case, let's talk about the white supremacists and how many of them need to be kicked out of this country, because I can guarantee you, I can track down more crimes that they've committed, because overall immigrants have a lower crime committal rate than white supremacists, but we don't want to talk about that in this.
That is seriously one of the most bizarre arguments I've ever seen, completely unbacked by data and framed in a way that's deliberately inflammatory. Jasmine says, let's deport white supremacists. Okay, show me the numbers. How many actual self-identified white supremacists are there in this country of 330 million, because every credible estimate from the ADL to DHS threat assessments put the number of active white supremacists in America in the low thousands, not millions, and nowhere near the scale that she's implying. Meanwhile, illegal immigration estimates range from the standard DHS figure of 11 million to independent demographic models that place a truer number closer to 20 to 30 million once you account for visa overstays and unrecorded crossings. And here's the part she refuses to acknowledge. Every illegal alien commits at least one federal crime by virtue of crossing the border illegally. 8 USC 1325. If they were previously deported, re-entry is a felony under 8 USC 1326. On top of that, the CBO, GAO, IRS, and SSA data all show millions of W-2s tied to fraudulent or mismatched Social Security numbers every single year. And the IRS ITIN system exists because undocumented workers cannot legally obtain Social Security numbers. Estimates of Social Security misuse run between 1 to 2 million active cases annually. These are crimes: document fraud, identity fraud, employment eligibility fraud, but the government doesn't categorize offenders by immigration status, which means the exact illegal only number is actually unknowable. So what we can measure is federal prosecution data between 2018 and 2020. Over half of all federal prosecutions in the United States were for illegal entry or illegal re-entry, which means that if you count immigration offenses as criminal offenses, illegal aliens dominate federal criminal courts, not because they're more violent, but because American citizens cannot commit those offenses at all. And when you combine unlawful entry, document fraud, identity fraud, illegal re-entry, and any other statutory violations required to live and work illegally, the arithmetic becomes unavoidable. Illegal aliens commit more total statutory offenses than native-born Americans if you treat every offense as equal. That's not ideology, folks. It's pure logic. So the idea that white supremacists commit more crime than immigrants overall is not only false, even a measurable category. White supremacist is an ideological group, not a census group. So if we're doing deportation by ideology according to Jasmine, then why stop at white supremacists? Why not deport black supremacists as well, or anyone who spews racial hatred online? See, this is absurd, and she knows it. A coherent policy is simple: deport anyone here illegally who commits a crime. But she can't say that because it forces accountability onto the very population her political coalition spends enormous energy protecting from scrutiny. And that's a deeper story here, folks. Instead of confronting the real legal, economic, and social consequences of mass illegal immigration, Democrats lean on buzzwords and invented statistics to moralize the issue, redirect anger, and create phantom villains. Normal people aren't buying this anymore because the grift is obvious. They need illegal aliens in the country so they can overinflate congressional representation in states like California, and so that in some of these states, some of these blue states, they can have some of those illegal aliens vote. That's really the reason behind this. Democrats are doing a demographic gerrymandering in many states, and they rely on illegal immigration to make it happen. And it just has to stop at this point, because the American people shouldn't be paying for their country to be stolen from under them by this party that clearly hates them. Because many of them are unironically going out on television and actually defending narco-terrorists. Yeah, Sunny Hostin just did it on The View.
I can't speak to the law of it. I don't know, I'm not a geopolitical expert. But in terms of the law of it, you're right, Sarah. That is why those Army
You just said you can't speak to it.
Explained. Do not follow, you do not have to follow illegal orders. You know why? Because if this is deemed to have been war crimes, which by all accounts right now, there are 7 sources that said Pete Hegseth did say kill them all, even after there were 2 survivors. What you're supposed to do under international law, you are supposed to take those fighters as war criminals, prisoners of war, and you're supposed to give them refuge, and you're supposed to take care of them, and then you are supposed to put them into a court of law.
This is typical The View, folks. Sunny Hostin says she can't speak to the law of it, and then immediately launches into a shaky lecture on international law like she's briefing The Hague. You can't make this up. The cognitive dissonance is absolutely unreal. It's like peeing in the pool and then bragging about how clean the water is. And what exactly is Sunny even arguing? That taking action to defend American citizens from narco-terrorists, cartel foot soldiers working for organizations pumping fentanyl into this country is somehow a war crime? Sunny Hostin is out here talking as if the moral priority is protecting fighters who are part of a transnational narcotics pipeline that's killing Americans by the tens of thousands every year, rather than protecting the American teenagers who are dying because they bought what they thought was a Xanax or Adderall pill on Snapchat that turned out to be laced with fentanyl. This isn't anecdotal, by the way, folks. Fentanyl overdoses are now the leading cause of death for Americans ages 18 to 45, and counterfeit pills from Mexico made with Chinese precursor chemicals are the primary driver. Congress has passed multiple bipartisan measures in the last 2 years acknowledging that the cartels are operating like paramilitary organizations and that fentanyl is a national security threat. And here is Sunny Hostin defending the people supplying the poison. Look, I'm not here cheering cruelty. I'm not jumping on the bandwagon of commentators who talk about wanting to see these narco-terrorists die slowly. That's not the road I take. I believe in letting God execute ultimate justice. But at the same time, a sovereign nation has the right and the obligation to defend itself and its citizens. Cartels are not misunderstood neighborhood pharmacists. They are some of the most violent, well-financed criminal syndicates on earth, and dealing with them is ugly, dirty work. That's the sad reality of geopolitics. For Sunny to moralize and present cartel operatives as sympathetic figures while ignoring the lives being destroyed in American families every single day is not compassionate. It's ideological blindness. And when she shields the very people driving this epidemic while young Americans unknowingly ingest counterfeit fentanyl-laced pills and die, she shares moral responsibility. Every preventable death that comes from enabling this chaos is a tragedy, and it's on the hands of anyone who chooses to defend the perpetrators rather than actually protecting the victims. We've reached extraordinary levels of moral and ideological inversion, folks. I mean, it is actually insane. From everything we saw today, folks, from a pastor coming out at the pulpit to the cultural rot that follows Sunny Hostin's worldview, you see how one inversion leads to another until the entire moral order is flipped upside down. You end up with a society that looks disturbingly close to Sodom and Gomorrah. One that protects perpetrators over victims, one that treats Americans as last and non-citizens as first, one that replaces equal justice with ideological favoritism, and one that weaponizes moral posturing as a tool to centralize power and manipulate a divided nation. And the fact that we're even here should force every person watching to ask, how much inversion are you willing to tolerate before you say enough is enough? How much of your reality are you willing to outsource to people who openly despise you and common sense? And how long will you let institutions meant to serve you become instruments to sneer at you? The truth is, this is the breaking point, folks. People are waking up. Common sense is coming back, and we're not going to sit idly by while our institutions are hijacked by people who are frankly incompetent ideological zealots who need to be aired out. The question now is whether you'll start questioning the narratives being fed to you, or whether you choose to let this inversion continue until there's nothing left to invert, and you lose everything you hold near and dear. You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.